Eye on You, a new show produced by students from the University of Massachusetts Lowell. I'm Bridget Driscol, and I'll be your host for the next hour. The focus of today's show is on the innovative Umass Lowell Sound Recording and Technology program. Joining us today, we have students Mark Stern, criminal justice major and reporter for The Connector; Cassie Rubico, cultural studies major, producer, and reporter for the TV show Eye on You. Also joining us, they'll be asking questions from our faculty guest, Dr. Moyland, Director of Sound Recording and Technology Program.
Yes.
And Tim Baralt, exciting, energetic, and talented UMass student in the SRT program.
That's
Thank
all
you.
correct.
Thank you for joining us today.
Good description.
And starting off our questions for today, Mark, what would you like to ask Dr.
Dr. Moylan, you've been at the school now for how long?
23 years.
23 years. You are the head of the music program?
I'm the chair of the Department of Music, and I'm the coordinator of the Sound Recording Technology program.
It's a big job for one man. Most important question is, how did you get your start in sound recording technology?
My start in sound recording technology went way back to my adolescence, probably. I became interested in how technology could be used in music in the early pop music that was taking place in the late 60s. When I first heard the recording Strawberry Fields, it was when it was first released, and I'm sorry to say I actually remember that. I became fascinated with how the sounds of that recording in 1967 had absolutely no relationship to how things were performed live. And that got me interested in how technology could transform music. Being a classical musician and being a jazz musician and being a pop musician at that age all came together when I finally realized that those things could happen. And I carried all of those types of music together throughout all of my career. I became very focused on the actual process of recording music when I was an undergraduate in college. And I was studying conducting, and there was a recording made of a piece that I was conducting for orchestra, and the recording was very different from what I heard when I was conducting it on the podium. And I went about trying to figure out why it was different. The differences bothered me in that I didn't understand them, not necessarily that I didn't care for them, but that not understanding led me to discover things about the recording field and led me to become a record engineer and record producer, and also brought me to be an electronic music composer, two things that were quite different. Yeah.
Now, Tim, you are of a different generation of him. You know, he's been here for as long as you've been alive. How did you get your start?
I played mostly rock music before, I guess, in and up towards the end of high school. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do as high school was drawing along, and I realized at first I didn't feel that it would be appropriate to be a music performance major, more because it just wasn't necessarily my thing. I didn't think that I wanted to be performing for a career for the rest of my life. I think I enjoyed it too much to try and make it a career. But I started seeking out other avenues within the music industry of ways to make my living and, you know, make my way through the rest of my life. And I couldn't really decide whether I wanted to do something in music business or sound recording. I mean, the idea of working in those fields kind of came up through the college search process. And I eventually, after doing some tours and looking at different programs, settled on sound recording and decided that UMass Lowell would be the best place to do that, to study that. And while I wasn't sure about the decision at first, the more I got into the program, the more time I spent, the more I realized it was definitely the right decision to make.
Cassie?
Was there any one person that inspired each of you at one time in your life to become involved in this field?
That's a good
Musicians or a family member, a parent?
My father actually got me started playing on the drums. He gave me my first few lessons because he played drums in high school. And he never did any professional study. He just taught himself and played in rock bands on weekends and stuff. And he was actually the one that encouraged me to do better than that and to start private study and to learn all the things that he had never learned. And I think, well, you know, with that push is definitely what made me able to go into music school. And I think that a combination of that and a lot of influence, my grandparents, when I told them I was going to be a music major, said that I should do something else, and there was no money in that or anything along those lines. And I think when they said that, I realized that there are other opportunities in the music field, and I think that's when I started to really dig in to see what else I could do with it. And I think that's part of what pushed me into sound recording.
Yeah, that's very cool.
How about you, Dr. Moynihan?
My career has been a journey, and just like we all in our lives, we go on journeys. And I think at each stage of your life, there are people who influence you in different ways and who really become people who help shape you. I started my career as a musician when I was about 6, trying to learn how to play the piano because I could hear things, and I was trying to generate them on an instrument. And my father didn't like me going into the basement of a church that we didn't belong to and practicing the piano. But that was the only access I had to an instrument, so I would sneak in and I would do that. Then finally, about 8 years old, I started to play the violin. And I started playing the violin because the high school music teacher was willing to work with me on the violin. And I ended up spending a good amount of time with him because of that. And there have been people all throughout my career, all the way through my dissertation, that teachers who have been mentors and who have shared certain things with me and shaped me in certain ways. And there's been musicians who've shaped me in equally profound ways. Yeah, and I think we have these influences in many different directions.
So when did that epiphany come for sound recording and technology? You played instruments from a very young age, and then, so was it in college that, I mean...
It's interesting. I have been terrifically fortunate throughout my career to have been passionately interested in a lot of things. And my work as a composer is intertwined with my work as a recording engineer, intertwined with my work as a record producer. Mm-hmm. When I produce a recording, I think in terms of composing the recording. When I'm working with performers, I think in terms of conducting them as performers. And I usually end up writing a lot of the music that we work with. Even if I'm not writing the piece itself, I'm writing how the mix is going to come together, and I'm helping them shape their performances at the same time. So it all comes together. I don't know if there was a direct time where I decided I was going to be a teacher, or I was going to be a record producer, or I was going to be a composer, or I was going to be a performer.
Okay.
Yeah, they all just sort of come together.
Cassie?
Well, I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself here because I know we're going to talk about the sound recording part of it later, but I know you composed over, 40
Yes.
published over 40 compositions.
Right.
How would you, if you had to tell a student how to publish something of their own, how would they go about something like that?
It depends on what kind of music it is. You approach publishing differently for a pop piece or a jazz piece or a classical piece.